From Montana's news leader, this is the MTN 530 News.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Jeanelle Slade. Well, there is peace this evening at our nation's capital, just one day after protesters stormed the Capitol, resulting in multiple arrests and 4 dead. Tonight, many are left wondering how this happened as they question security procedures at U.S. capitals. Well, Montana political leaders tell us they are closely monitoring the national situation, but as of right now, do not plan to make major changes to security procedures at the state capitol. MTN's Jonathan Ambarian explains.
The Montana General Services Division oversees security on the state capitol campus. The division administrator says they expected protests in Washington, D.C. and in Helena on Wednesday, and they were already set up in an emergency operations center.
We had it ramped up and we were in here long before anything even started in D.C.
Steve Baiamonte says they already had additional security resources in place at the Capitol because the legislature is in session. While he didn't want to release specific information about procedures, he said they have made plans for a wide variety of possible security issues, and Wednesday's events didn't force them to make significant adjustments.
It's really more of maybe like making a different call in the middle of the game as opposed to developing a whole new play.
About 100 people attended a demonstration in support of President Trump in front of the Montana State Capitol Wednesday. Leaders didn't report any incidents involving that protest. Baiamonte says their objective is to maintain security while having as little impact as possible on people at the Capitol.
We truly respect the fact that it's the people's house, that you have a right to come here to testify, and you have a right to come here to protest, and you have a right to come here just to walk around and look at your Capitol. And our goal is to make sure that everybody can do that and respect each other's rights to do the same.
Baiamonte says they'll continue to monitor the situation across the country closely in the coming days and weeks. He says they've heard of 15 to 20 state capitals that had security incidents on Wednesday. In Helena, Jonathan Ambarian, MTN News.
Well, new Montana Representative Matt Rosendale was at the Capitol as protesters stormed in. Well, tonight he talked with Russ Riesinger about the violence that erupted. Russ.
Well, Jeanelle, Congressman Rosendale told me he didn't have any security concerns beforehand, that it had started out as a very quiet day. It certainly didn't end that way.
Representatives had just begun debate on an objection to the vote in Arizona when they got word that a breach had occurred. It wasn't long afterwards they were being told to evacuate.
And every time they would slam a door, people, you could see that their nerves were on edge. They weren't sure if there was a firearm being discharged. So I was doing my very best to help people get their gas masks on. And once most of the folks were about out of the room, then I went ahead and joined in with them and exited the room. Once we exited the House chambers and we got into the hallway, that's the first time that I saw some of the demonstrators. They were behind a door that had already been locked and secured.
How concerning is that? This could have been far worse.
Oh, it could have been. I mean, and many times it's like, a lot of things can be a lot worse. I try to look on the positive side of things. I don't like the idea that people did penetrate the Capitol, that were looking to conduct violence. That is not good. But the Capitol Police did do their job. They dirty.
A lot of your fellow lawmakers have pointed the blame directly at President Trump for this. Do you think he deserves any of the blame?
The people who committed the acts of violence must take responsibility for their actions, which are completely contrary to the peaceful process that our government provides, and that's what I look to.
You don't think he fanned the flames, though?
No, people need to take responsibility for their own actions, Ross. They have to.
After about 3 hours, lawmakers returned to finish their work and certify Joe Biden as president, despite a majority of House Republicans, including Rosendale, rejecting the results from Arizona and Pennsylvania.
What's been the reaction from your constituents back here in Montana?
It's split, and I anticipated this much. But the people of Montana elected me not to check the winds of polls on a daily basis. What they did was elect me to come up here, to listen to information, to evaluate it with the best of my ability, and then to cast a vote. And when I sat there on the floor, I listened to the discussions about the numerous, extensive, credible allegations of fraud and irregularities that took place in Arizona and in Pennsylvania, and that's why I voted to oppose those or reject those electors.
Rosendale also said he believes it will be a smooth transition to Joe Biden as president. You can listen to that entire interview where he also talks about his priorities for his first term in Congress on our website, ktvq.com. Jeanelle?
All right, thanks so much, Russ. Well, Governor Gianforte says he was shocked by what happened yesterday. He addressed the events during a news conference in Helena today. Gianforte served as Montana's lone U.S. House member before becoming governor and says seeing the images from the Capitol was jarring. Gianforte described the protesters who broke into the Capitol as a violent mob and says democracy was under siege. He also says those type of actions have no place in a civil society.
I was pleased that the president said, go home. There probably could have been a stronger statement made there. I'm glad it's over, and I look forward to a peaceful transfer of power on the 20th this month.
And Gianforte says he's pleased that demonstrations in Montana remained peaceful yesterday. Well, today Gianforte also released his first proposed two-year budget for the state. And as MTN's Mike Dennison reports, it includes some tax cuts and new programs as promised during his campaign, but it also cuts spending.
At a Capitol News conference, Governor Gianforte got right to the point on what he considers the most important elements of his budget.
I promised we would provide tax relief to hardworking Montanans and get Montana open for business. This budget does that.
So what type of tax cuts? He wants to reduce the top state income tax rate paid by about half of Montana taxpayers from 6.9% to 6.75%. He's also proposing to exempt more business equipment from property taxes and help lower-income homeowners escape property tax increases caused by reappraisal. As for new spending, Gianforte wants to help school districts increase beginning teacher pay and increase money for trades education. But his biggest spending ask is for attacking the effects of drug addiction in Montana.
Few Montanans have been left untouched by the epidemic of addiction and drug use. The crisis is ripping apart our families and our communities. Our budget commits an additional $23.5 million in state and federal dollars per year.
That spending includes money for drug treatment courts, more parole and probation officers to supervise criminal offenders outside of prison, and more treatment in the correctional system. But where's the money coming from to finance these tax cuts and new spending? Gianforte says he's cutting about $100 million out of the budget initially proposed by his predecessor, Democrat Steve Bullock. The legislature must now review and decide on his budget. House Appropriations Committee Chair Lou Jones told MTN News he expects lawmakers to have many of their own ideas, but that Republicans also want to honor Gianforte's pledge to hold the line on spending.
A lot of these ideas that are coming in, if they come with a fiscal note, it may not be the year to have a good idea.
Of course, we haven't had much chance yet to examine the details of this huge document and how it might affect Montanans all across the state. That's what lawmakers will start doing now, and we'll be doing the same here at MTN News. In Helena, I'm Mike Dennison.
All right, thanks so much, Mike. Now, committee hearings on the state budget start as early as Friday and continue for the next several weeks. Well, Montanans on unemployment due to the pandemic are now getting an additional $300 in their checks. The Montana Department of Labor and Industry offers the increased unemployment insurance benefit through the passage of the recent federal stimulus legislation. The new program launched Tuesday with $3.2 million in payments made that day. Now, the money will be available for eligible unemployment claims, pandemic unemployment assistance, and pandemic emergency unemployment compensation.
Under the federal legislation, this additional $300 payment will be available for eligible claims from the UI week ending January 2nd, 2021 through the week ending March 13th, 2021.
There are currently thousands of available jobs in Montana. You can find more information about job opportunities and how to file for unemployment can be found at montanaworks.gov. Well, as of this morning, all Yellowstone County COVID-19 related health orders are rescinded, but that doesn't mean you'll see any changes just yet. Numbers show county case counts have dropped to a third of what they were during the peak of the pandemic, and we did not see a surge after Thanksgiving. Felton says he's removing his orders thanks to the hard work of county residents and out of respect to new Governor Gianforte to manage the pandemic according to his policies. At the same time, Felton says the county will not comply with the governor's recent change in vaccine priority. Earlier this week, Gianforte announced all residents between the ages of 16 and 69 with underlying conditions and those over the years of 70 can be vaccinated. But Felton says Yellowstone County is still vaccinating frontline healthcare workers, and supply and demand just don't match up.
I think we need to understand that if the number, let's just use the number of 250,000 people statewide, our share of that is probably 25 or 30,000 people, and it's going to take a while to get through that.
And Felton says the current vaccine supply is not very predictable, so he can't determine how long it will take to get through this first tier, let alone the next tier. But he does hope over the next week to learn more. Well, one of the first bills in front of our state legislature would limit liability in Montana for damages related to COVID-19 exposure. It's being heard Friday before a state legislative committee. The bill is sponsored by Republican State Senator Steve Fitzpatrick of Great Falls. It says if you or your business is complying with laws, regulations, or public health guidelines related to COVID-19, you will not be held liable for any potential exposure to the disease. The bill also says people can't claim damages for exposure to COVID-19 unless it involves hospitalization or death or gross negligence by someone else. Governor Gianforte says he'll remove the state's face mask mandate in public places when businesses have this sort of protection. He says that protection will incentivize businesses to require face masks and other precautions on their premises. While the pandemic and its restrictions mean unemployment for some, it's also created a job boom for the Billings healthcare industry. Job postings for registered nurses are up 70% from a year ago. Filling those spots has been a challenge for our local hospitals as they also look to recruit the best doctors, primary care physicians, techs, and other positions. Steve Arviskow with Big Sky Economic Development was a guest on Montana This Morning today to weigh in.
I believe, in talking with our healthcare leadership, that is a platform for our economic growth and recovery. We're going to see expansion and growth of that healthcare infrastructure. That'll be a part of, if we're strategic, being able to use that growth as part of our economic growth and recovery.
He says another challenge is finding creative ways to retain and grow medical talent so the local economy continues to recover. Well, up next on tonight's 5:30 news here on Q2, a doggone good story about rescue treats served up special for our homeless pets. And in sports, a trip to Bridger to hit the hardwood with the boys basketball team. Keep it here.
Wasn't much difference between the morning and the afternoon temperatures. We went from 33 all the way to 39, but we did pick up our first measurable precipitation of the year. We'll tell you about those effects when we come back.